Good evening. I want to tell you why I'm here. I'm here because I love America and the dream that she holds. I believe that this democracy is the grand dream of a world yet to be seen. We're 230 years in on trying to do what no nation in the history of the world has tried, and we fail, and we fall down, and we get bloody every day on the way up this mountain of decency, equality, and righteousness. She has stumbled and fallen, but she still lives. And the opportunity to achieve this dream is in your hands and mine, and there is no greater pursuit towards that dream politically than an even playing field for men and women to stand to serve this nation. And for that to happen, it can't be about money. Number one is a good thing. We all strive to be number one. About 12 years ago, I was number one. The number one Democratic financial donor in the state of Washington. For all, in my mind, the right reasons. Not to get a bill passed so I could build another building or gain more power of control. All in the name of dignity and righteousness and justice and health care and access to education and the elimination of violence and all the things that I've been brought up to believe my entire life matter. And in those pursuits, I put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into finding candidates that shared those dreams and goals. And I can tell you that 20 years ago when the phone would ring, and it was a United States senator from Illinois or California or Florida, my heart would pound with the passion of my nation. I can tell you now when those calls come, they just make me sad. They make me sad that that man or woman who doesn't even know me, who I can't even vote for, has to call me and stumble through my last name, Mr. Alderschluff. I've heard so many wonderful things about you. And I'm anxious then to have a dialogue about my dreams and passions for my nation, about my heart, my head, my soul, and how I might participate with them in democracy. They patiently listen for 27 seconds and then thunder into their appeal for my money. I'm not angry at them. They have no choice. And I'd rather have them than them. So, what am I to do? So I got involved in this, and when I first got involved, people said to me, you cannot do this because it's unconstitutional. It's against freedom of speech. And my answer to that simply is this. If you drop a ball from the Space Needle, it's going down, and it's going down because of gravity. But if the owners of the NFL tell us next year that it's 5 downs for a first down, and it takes 40 yards to make a first down, well, we'll be watching those Seahawks, and it'll be 5th and 31. And we'll go, well, wait a minute, that can't be. There's only 4. Yes, it could be, and you know why? Well, because football's a game with rules. Freedom isn't a game. But elections, the physical process of election, those are games with rules. Why is it Tuesday? How come it's November? Why do you have to be 18? Why do the polls close and open at certain times? We make all kinds of rules about how we do elections, and we can absolutely make rules about the money piece of this equation. Before I turn over my duties to what I'm supposed to be doing, and that is helping navigate through this incredible group of people up here, I have to say two last things. Three. First, I still give money, and a lot of it. And I don't want to do it anymore. And I pledge to work with you to not have to. Second, to all of you elected officials who are here, thank you for having the courage to serve your country, your state, and your community. It's not an easy thing to do anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Clean elections, non-clean election. Every elected representative is put up against a mirror every day of his or her life, trying to do good deeds for the most part. And it takes courage and tenacity to do so. And we are honored that you all are doing that and here tonight. So thank all of you. And to each and every one of you, sitting in this incredible place, this historic place, on this windy, rainy Friday night in Seattle, who love the dream of freedom and opportunity so much that you are giving her your greatest possession, you. Thank you. If the founders of this nation were here tonight, and they are, they would be smiling. You see, this is what they had in mind. You are what they had in mind. We've gone astray. And it may not get back on course in our lifetime, or our children's, or even that grandson of mine, Max. But if we do not get on the course, we will never reach the dream of America. Thank you for being pathfinders. All right now. We have with us tonight a distinguished group of panelists, as I said, and they'll each be introduced shortly. But first, I'd like you to do the following. We're going to have time to understand that there'll be questions later, and there's people going around. You get to fill out cards. We'll read as many of them as we can. Any question that doesn't get answered tonight will be answered on the website. So please feel free to ask those. And now we're going to have some words from John King. As chair of the Policy Committee for Washington Public Campaigns, John is our lead advocate to the Washington State Legislature. He's an attorney in private practice in Seattle. John?
Thank you, Ken. Good evening. Washington Public Campaigns is a citizens group dedicated to the cause of public financing of political campaigns in this state. We believe that public financing is the natural order of things, and that the current system of private financing is the aberration. We believe that financing of political campaigns is as much a responsibility of government as monitoring the polls and counting the ballots. It is a public good, like roads and parks and schools. We believe it makes little sense to delegate one of democracy's most sensitive functions to private interests self-selected as the ones having the greatest interest in skewing the results in their own favor. We believe the legacy of those who have fought for democracy throughout our history deserves better than a system where the trappings of an equal voice for all citizens are trumped by a foot on the scale on behalf of a handful of private interests. And we're all the more determined to act on our beliefs because the cost, in view of what we're buying, is frankly paltry. In the legislative session beginning next week, Washington Public Campaigns is supporting essentially 3 bills. A local bill, expected to be introduced by Joe McDermott and Rosa Franklin, that would allow local governments to use public funds in the financing of political campaigns. as Seattle and King County did before nullified by an ill-considered sentence in a 36-section citizens initiative in 1992. It made a strong showing in the last legislative session, and we believe has additional momentum going forward this time. We expect the City of Seattle to be an important ally in this fight, as it was last year. The second bill that we are supporting is a judicial bill that would allow for public funding and provide for public funding of Supreme Court and Court of Appeals races. It's expected to be introduced by panelist Representative Shea Schwal-Burke and by request of Governor Gregoire. This legislation is expected to be modeled on a successful program of public funding that has run for 2 election cycles in the state of North Carolina. And it is prompted by the enormous amount of money that was spent on the judicial races last fall for the Supreme Court. We believe this also has a strong chance of passage in the coming session. Our third piece of legislation that we're supporting is a comprehensive bill expected to be introduced by panelists Representative Mark Miloscia and Senator Jim Castema. It would apply to state executive and legislative races. It's modeled after successful programs in Arizona and Maine, states also represented on the panel this evening. In addition to Arizona and Maine, Connecticut, about a year ago, passed a full public financing program that will be implemented beginning in 2008. 2 days ago, I was very pleased to see in the news that incoming Governor Eliot Spitzer of New York added his enormous prestige to the cause by calling for full public financing of political campaigns in that state. Because of the newness of this, of some of the concepts in this provision, we think this will be an uphill battle, but we plan to give it everything we've got in the coming legislative session. We look forward to working with our long-term allies, the League of Women Voters of Washington, in these efforts, and we will put bill numbers on the website when we have them so that you can all know exactly what bills we're talking about. Now, how does public financing work? Well, the local bill essentially is however the local government decides to do it. Many of them do matching programs. The City of Portland, the City of Albuquerque have done full public financing programs. One thing, now talking about the state comprehensive bill and the judicial bill, in a nutshell, they're voluntary programs. You don't have to participate if you don't want to. And essentially, they're as outlined in the video that we just saw. The candidate that wants to participate goes out and gets a certain number of small contributions, maybe $5, as in the video. And then if he gets enough of them, he or she gets enough of them, the candidate then is certified, gets an infusion of money, and if he or she wins the primary, gets another infusion for the general. If a privately financed opponent spends more, that can be matched up to certain limits. And if there are independent expenditures against a publicly financed candidate or in favor of an opponent, that money is treated as if spent by a privately financed opponent for purposes of the matching program. And that's basically it. It's run usually by an independent agency of the government, and that agency must be very diligent to monitor the expenditures and the inflow and outflow of monies, and particularly be responsive for the matching funds. But we're very pleased to say that in Arizona and Maine, they have in fact shown the way for us, which will make it, I think, a lot easier for us to do here. WPC is developing a field organization that is geared toward the legislative districts, and we urge all of you to get involved with that organization and with your local communities to support this. We will not be able to do this from Seattle or from Olympia or from Washington Public Campaign's handful of activists. This has to be a grassroots organization from around the state. And I think Mark Miloscia has told me on a prior occasion that if a legislator gets 10 calls from somebody interested in promoting legislation like this, this has an impact. Because that citizen who's making those calls, or those citizens making those calls, are people who are motivated and care enough to make it happen. And that registers. I mean, there's still a lot of person-to-person contact with your legislators, and you can have a tremendous influence. So we encourage you to get involved and to contact your legislators. Make the opponents into neutrals. Make the fence-sitters into firm supporters, and make the supporters into champions. As for funding, there are certainly various ways to do it. General fund is one option. Dedicated funds have some advantages. You'll see from Arizona and Maine and Connecticut, they've done it in various ways, and we may have some discussion of that from our other panelists. What we want to stress is that we did a study less than a year ago, in which we determined that at the outside it might cost $3.36 per Washington resident per year to fully fund our judicial, executive, and legislative races for the state. And now think about what you can buy for $3.36 a year. If you parked at a meter before 6 o'clock here, you might have paid close to that amount. If you buy a latte, you're paying that amount. Think about what this is. It's less than a penny a day per Washington resident per year. And I'm happy to report that I've been informed that Arizona and Maine cost even less. This is something that we can afford to buy back democracy. Friends and fellow citizens, we can do this. And with the concerted effort of concerned citizens of this state, we will. Thank you.
This will probably come as a shock to you. You know, if we wanted to pay the bill to federally fund the entire national election process, you know what it would cost us? 25% of what we spend a year in this country on dog food. Okay. Away we go. Now we're pleased to have with us from the great state of Maine on our opposite coast, State Representative Linda Valentino. Maine adopted a clean election program by Citizens Initiative in 1996. Representative Valentino was elected to the Maine legislature in 2004 and 2006. She and her husband live in Saco, Maine, a small town southwest of Portland, where they've raised 3 children. Representative Linda Valentino.
Thank you very much, Ken. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the Washington Public Campaigns for all of the input that they have had and all of the work and the dedication that I've seen from all of the volunteers to make this a very successful event, not only this evening, but the event in Everett and 2 more events that we're doing tomorrow. And thank you very much for all of your support and all of your dedication. I'd like to start off by saying that before I came to Washington, I received a phone call from one of your reporters, and the reporter asked me while I was still back in Saco, I understand that you're coming out to Washington, and I wanted to know what you think the chances are, clean elections, of passing in Washington, and what are you going out to Washington to tell them? And I said, first of all, being a state representative, my back was a little up when I heard that, as my esteemed colleagues would probably be. And I told your reporter, first of all, I'm not going out to Washington to tell them anything. And I don't know what's going to happen in Washington, because that's up to Washington and that's not up for me. And that's the spirit in Maine, I'll tell you. With that being said, I am only here to tell you what works in Maine and why it works in Maine and why we like it in Maine. That you can take and all of your esteemed colleagues that are sitting up here, and they can run with that, you can run with that, based on what we tell you here this evening. First of all, just going back over, this was passed in 1996, as shown in the film. This was a citizen initiative that passed. 56% of the state of Maine voted for it. In 1996, it was started. We started funding it with funds out of the general election, and in 2000 was the first time that we ran clean elections in the state of Maine. I'm here to tell you why it works in the state of Maine and why people like it. First of all, candidates. Why do the candidates like it? The candidates love it. Both sides of the aisle. I'm a Democrat. I can guarantee you any one of my Republican colleagues would be standing here saying the exact same thing that I'm telling you right now. First of all, to let you know, if you're an incumbent, 91% of our incumbents won re-election. If you're a new candidate trying to run for election, this gives you the money to wage a decent campaign against an incumbent. It gives you the opportunity that anybody can run for election as long as you meet the minimal threshold of the qualifying campaigns. As long as you are a credible candidate, the state of Maine is willing to give you money as long as you prove your credibility threshold, which is set so that anybody who is willing to run can do this. Also, why do we like it? We're tired of dialing for dollars. We're tired of spending our money to raise money, to have campaign finance parties, to be sending out invitations, to be calling people, to be begging for money all of the time. This enables us to do what we want to do, which is go meet the people and get our ideas across to the people. Secondly, why do our legislative leaders like these clean election campaigns? Our legislative leaders, if any of you have seen the first Bill Moyer video, Glenn Cummings is on it as a very young representative on his first election running in 2000. Glenn Cummings is now Speaker of the House of Representatives. Deb Simpson, who you saw on the video, the young mother, single mother, who actually is the manager of a TGIF Fridays. She is the chair of our Judiciary Committee. She is not a lawyer, and she's sitting there with 5 other lawyers on our judiciary, but we have chosen her to lead because of her dedication. Leaders like it because it frees them up to do what they're supposed to do, to lead the party and to help candidates in all of the races. The political parties love clean elections, the Democrats, the Republicans. We have 151 seats in our House of Representatives. Out of the 151 seats, we had 149 contested elections. The Democrats and the Republicans were able to field candidates in all of these races because they were able to tell people there was money to start your election and to help you, and that you did not have to go out and beg for this money. Businesses love the clean elections. Any of you who are a small business owner over here knows that at least once a week somebody is coming into you and they want money for something, whether it's the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the American Red Cross, the local theater group. There is something that has to be done. This is one way that businesses do not have to always feel obligated when a candidate walks in that they have to write a check because they're afraid that you're going to vote against them on some major piece of legislation. Small businesses owners like it. And last but not least, why do the people like it? The people like it because you have a candidate that is out doing doors, knocking on their doors, talking about the issues. You have competitive races. You don't have people skirting by unopposed. You have people talking about issues, which has a dialogue going on in every single community throughout the state. And it's not about money, but it's about the issues. The biggest... And why do I know that everybody likes this and why it works? Because in 2000, those people who were afraid of the change, afraid, am I going to have enough money to run my campaign? How is that going to work? Only 33% use the clean election funds. And in only 6 years in the state of Maine, we have gone from 33% of our elected officials to 83% of our elected officials. Clean elections has worked in the state of Maine, and hopefully it may work here. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's exciting. A few years back, I seriously considered running for the U.S. Senate, and I went back to D.C. and met with the leadership of the Democratic Party, so excited to share with them my visions and dreams. And the first question, the very first question, how much of your personal wealth are you going to put in the campaign, and how much money can you raise? No questions about my dreams and ideas, only about the money. What a wonderful idea that every man and woman who ran for office would be judged on the content of their mind, their character, and their ideas, not on their dialing for dollars. We can do this. Wow. Wow. And now we are pleased to have with us from our nation's southwest state, Senator Ed Ableser from Temple, Arizona. Arizona adopted clean elections in 1998 by citizen initiative. Ed was originally appointed to the state Senate to fill a vacated seat, but then ran as a clean election candidate last November and was elected as a state representative from Temple, Scottsdale area. Ed?
Oh, well, I'll be honest, I'm really honored to be here and be part of your small little revolution in the northwest corner of our country. You know, I'm from Arizona, and it's 75 degrees right now, and blue skies, shorts, and I'm wearing 2 pairs of socks on my feet. I had to take off my jacket because I was afraid I was going to offend everyone, and so, but in all honesty, this is such a meaningful initiative, and that's why I'm here tonight, to bring my message from Arizona that, 1, it's successful, 2, it's completely bipartisan, and both parties love clean elections, and today it's got huge public opinion, and it's revolutionized the way we do policy in Arizona. I want you to envision sort of a scenario that took place between me and a fellow senator from Arizona. We were at lunch, and this senator, you know, we both have our phones, and his phone kept ringing, and we look at it, and he says, okay, I'll push it off, and he interrupts my lunch. He says, I got to take this call, And he walks outside. He says, oh, that's a big lobbyist. I got to answer their call. You know, I'm interested in, you know, something that they're talking about. And he's hoping to run for Congress. And he's wanting to move up in the political ladder, and so in his opinion, he can't run as a clean elections candidate because he has to make these connections with lobbyists to move forward. And so he's answering every lobbyist call. Well, my assistant in the Senate knows every time a citizen in my district calls to forward that call to my phone number. So every time I look and see the number from the Arizona State House or Senate call, I pick it up, I say, yes, Connie, what's going on? She said, I've got a citizen on the phone, and I leave every meeting, I leave every lunch. That citizen is more important to me than anything else because they're the ones that elect me. And that's the way it should be. And that's the way, let's hope, that you could turn it here in Washington. Arizona has such a successful experience, and for me, I'm one of those individuals that went through their master's program, and along came 9/11, and you're seeing what's going on, and No Child Left Behind hits, and we're seeing failed policy in Arizona, and I'm teaching to my students at Arizona State University the effects of bad policy in public education. I just get really emotional and passionate about these issues, and someone's like, oh, well, you should run, you should get involved, you should get active, and I'm sure many of you have had that sort of experience until you hit that brick wall. It's like, well, I don't have the Goldwater name in Arizona, I don't have connections with lobbyists to give me thousands of dollars, and I don't know if it's in me to take money from lobbyists for thousands of dollars. So I don't know if I want to run. And it came to my attention about clean elections. I was unaware of it, and I had a student inform me about it that actually encouraged me to run. And my first campaign was led by my students at Arizona State University that I taught, and it was exciting. And what we have in Arizona is legislators, the Arizona State House and the Arizona State Senate, that before clean elections consisted of independently wealthy individuals, that children from the bigwig families in Arizona, tons of lawyers, and tons of independently wealthy farmers, the corporate farms in Arizona. Today we have teachers, we have firefighters, we have police officers, we have nurses, we have social workers, we have counselors, we have homemakers. We have the average individual that comes to the State House and serves their state for a select time and then goes back to their constituency with pride and says, I'm part of you, I work in your community, and I'm here to represent you, and not private interests or special interests that usually revolves around the state. Another big benefit of clean elections is the way we campaign. I don't have to go out and be judged by the glitz and glamour of tons of money and who can produce a better TV commercial and who can create enough money to have more ads in the newspaper or more signs on the yards. I have to go out and go door to door and talk to every citizen and tell them what I think is wrong with our political process, what I think needs to happen, and my ideas to change for the future, for the betterment of Arizona. That's the only way that I can get elected, and that's the way that both sides of the party work. We work and we go door to door. We knock on over 10,000 doors individually. That's how many me and my seatmate knocked on this past election cycle. That's how you win elections, and that's the way it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be by big money. And I was judged by my merit. I was judged by my platform, and ultimately, that's true citizen-elected legislature, and that's what our hopes are here for Washington and hopefully for across the country. And each state that this occurs in is just another step towards federal reform for clean elections for federal candidates, and that's what we truly need. I'm a fan of political science and theories, and throughout my education, I had the chance to read de Tocqueville quite often, and something that always stuck with me about his impression of democracy, when he came from France as a very wealthy scholar and looked around and said, wow, what is this country of America? This democracy system is amazing, and it's something that we're all proud of today, but his caution to the citizens of America was against these large corporate fascist interests controlling the outcomes of elections. That if these big money interests can contribute and gain enough clout in the political spectrum, democracy falters, and now you have this sort of fascist system. And if we look around today, I think, unfortunately, de Tocqueville was somewhat of a prophet. And I think it's our responsibility to reclaim that democracy and change the way that this country is headed. And so let's hope that you all can get out there and tell your friends and family about this and get your legislators excited to change Arizona or Washington, like Arizona and Maine. I guess, if there's any other changes, I learned some stuff about Washington. You don't have a state income tax. That's new. Arizona has a state income tax. Oh, you're happy about that? Okay. I also found out. I also found out that no one in here uses heaters. Is that a typical? In Arizona, when it's 70 degrees, I bump my heater up to 80. So I've enjoyed being here, and I'm excited about doing whatever I can as just another member of the citizens in this country, helping reclaim our democracy. And I'm one of you. I'm just from Arizona, where it's a lot brighter, it's a lot warmer. Come visit us. There's my plug for tourism. But we need you to work hard for this, because we need to see this manifest here in Washington. Thank you very much. I look forward to answering questions.
Well, you know, we really don't mean to rain on your parade. You know, Ed and Linda are just absolutely fabulous. I mean, both of them are inspiring and energetic. And I'm sitting back in there and I'm thinking, I'm going to send each one of these guys $1,000. And they're going to send me back $995 and a thank you note. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce David Sirota, author, political strategist, social commentator, and a man that many of you know. David has served as press secretary for independent Congressman, now United States Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Yo, Bernie! He was recently a senior strategist for Brian Schweitzer, Montana's first Democratic governor in 16 years. And his book, Hostile Takeover, serves as a no-nonsense guide to how we're going to get our government back, partly through public financing of election campaigns. David lives in Helena, Montana with his wife, Emily, and his dog, and we won't take all of his dog food away, Monty. David, we need to have you keep talking, keep writing, and keep being part of this. I give you David Sirota.
Thank you. You know, it says on this thing here that it's a VIP, and I got to be honest, it feels kind of ridiculous, because my feeling is that the VIPs that you're looking at are all of these people up here who have the guts to push something that challenges the very system that they are in. And so I want to say thank you to all of them, because it is the hardest thing. It is the hardest thing in the world to challenge a system that you are in. And that is really what this is all about. This is trying to get our state legislators, our representatives, to change a system which they are in and which they ascended from. And that's very, very difficult. And so what you need to understand from the outset of this fight is that they need your help. They need your help in order to make this a reality. One of the most famous quotes from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and I'll probably butcher the story a little bit, but basically a group of people comes to him and says, we'd like you to pass this legislation. Here's this policy we'd like. They go through all the charts, all the graphs, showing why it's great policy. And FDR says, okay, you've convinced me. Now go bring pressure on me. These people are elected. These people need us to create and help them create the political space to make this a reality, especially something like this, because it is challenging and reforming the system by which their colleagues were elected under. That's why this is so important. I heard somebody say earlier today that, you know, I'm into so many different issues. I'm an environmentalist, I'm for this, I'm for that, but this is the one issue that touches all of the other issues. This is the one issue you can't get, I would argue, real healthcare reform unless you have a system that allows for a real healthcare debate to happen in a legislature. It's the same for every issue. You can't have a real debate about taxes unless you have a system by which your representatives are elected where they can have a real debate about tax reform. And it goes on and on and on. I started out, my first job in politics, after serving in college as a researcher for a congressional campaign in Chicago. And if you want to see dirty politics, go work in a Democratic primary in Chicago. My first job after that was being a fundraiser for a contested U.S. House race, one of the top targets. In fact, I believe it was in 1998, it was one of only 5 or 10 contested House races that actually defeated a Republican incumbent. What I learned on that race, what I did every day, was make sure money was coming into the campaign. I was essentially a professional beggar and a professional person who knew how to get people with money on the phone so that my boss could close the deal. And the money came in. Checks after check after check came in, and we won. And my boss was a good guy, was a great congressman. And after 3 terms representing one of the toughest House districts in the United States at that point, although it's been redistricted now, he got out. He said, "I'm tired of this. I don't want to run every 2 years begging people for money. That's not what I got into politics for. That's not why I became a state representative 30 years ago and then a county commissioner. I didn't do it for that." And so I would argue to you that without doing this, if we don't do this, we will continue to have a system that tries to force out good people. We can't have good people unless we have a system that encourages good people. That's not to say, of course, that folks who are in the system right now are bad people. I wish the guy I worked for back in 1998 would have stayed in. The people up here who are fighting for this are the best people because they're in a system where the easiest thing to do is not fight for this. So let me go over one of the things that I think hasn't been discussed about why this is so important. It's something I think we lose a little bit of, and it's sort of an intangible. Ask yourself, what does the current system give an incentive to? What does it select for? This system selects for people who are good not at legislating, not as community leaders, but good at raising money. That's what the system generally selects for. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you can't get good policy people, good legislators through the system, but the system as a whole is selecting for people who can raise money. Now think about this. After a while, who are these people, who are our representatives have to surround themselves with in a majority or at least a large portion of their time? They are talking to people who can give money. Well, what is that socioeconomic strata? Usually I would just say it, in a nice way of putting it, it doesn't necessarily correspond to the socioeconomic strata of their communities. So what we have is, if you want to know why the political debate in this country seems divorced from, for instance, the political debate you might have in your community, it's because many of the representatives are forced to be in a community. They exist in a community that's different from the communities that they're supposed to represent. And this plays out in all sorts of ways that aren't black and white. This plays out not in necessarily a brazen sellout, but it's more like, let's take outsourcing. The people as a member of Congress, a lawmaker, the people I spend time with telling me that, we can't do anything about outsourcing, and so we shouldn't try to stop those tax breaks that incentivize outsourcing, and, that sounds about right, and everyone I'm around tells me that that's right. It's very gray. It's sort of a culture where the people that you are listening to, that you are forced to listen to, are people with a different perspective necessarily than your constituents. And that divorces us as a community from the people who are supposed to be representing us. That is why in my book is a chronicle of how the debate in this country about major issues doesn't match the debate over the issues that we have in our community. If you want to know why the political system isn't having a debate about the facts about minimum wage, it has something to do with this system. If you want to know why we keep having a debate in this country over energy policy that tells us that we can drill our way out of our energy problems, it's because of this system. All of the debates, when you turn on that television and you see politicians debating things and saying things that have absolutely no basis in reality, it's because of this system. The system does not provide an incentive for people to have a debate in the way that we, in our communities, have a debate. And so I would argue that until we change this system, until we give our representatives resources that do not come with the expectation of legislative favors, we will continue to get the same kind of government that we have been getting. You know, it's like the old adage goes, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If you're wondering why your government doesn't work, if you're wondering why your political debate doesn't relate to your life, it's because we keep expecting different results by doing the same thing over and over again. And this campaign to change our election system is a way to stop doing the same thing and start doing something that takes our government back. Through the Progressive States Network, which is an organization that I founded with a number of legislators from all over the country, we are going to be trying to amplify what has happened and is happening in Arizona and Maine, and hopefully here in Washington, to other legislators across the country. You have a chance right now to lead for the country, to show that this can be done in yet another state. That is how movements start. You are at the vanguard of a movement. The country is going to be watching. That is a very huge responsibility. And that means that all of you, when you leave tonight, you need to go out into your communities and start talking about this. This is not an easy issue to explain in a 30-second soundbite. My sort of rudimentary analysis of why this kind of reform had such trouble in California was because it's a huge state, and when it was put up for a ballot initiative last time, there wasn't the education campaign over a number of years, and it became a war of 30-second ads. This cannot be won in a war of 30-second ads. We are trying to change an entire system. You cannot boil that down into one soundbite. And that means that we need a massive education campaign in our communities, whether it means this legislative session, next year, the next legislative session. It's going to require a patience that we in politics are usually not used to exerting. We expect every 2 years the whole world is going to change. You know, I can't listen to anybody anymore who's like, you know, the congressional elections means the entire country is going to be fixed. I mean, I'm very excited about the last congressional elections, but I don't think the world is necessarily fixed. We're at the beginning, at least as far as my perspective is. And I should remind you, to know that we're just at the beginning, remember, all the talk about ethics reform and lobbying reform in the current Congress, have you noticed one thing that they're not talking about? They're not talking about the nexus of money and politics. They're not talking about campaign finance reform. I mean, these people are going on to TV with a straight face and saying that they're going to solve the ethics and corruption problems without actually dealing with lobbyists and special interests giving them money. They're doing this. Roll Call newspaper 2 days ago published a story where the lobbyists said, we're going to figure out a way to get around all of these loopholes, and all this reform means is that the fundraisers we throw for lawmakers are going to be that much more important to us getting what we want. So it's up to the states. That's why I'm working so hard with the Progressive States Network. That's why your work is so important. The more states this happens in, the more our entire government will be changed. And it's not going to happen overnight. So in closing, I just want to reiterate again the most important thing I think I've said. If your state chooses to do this, and this is your state's decision, if you want this to happen, you are going to need to work as hard as you can to help these people, these courageous lawmakers up here, help them and their colleagues make this a reality. Help them help us, to use a cliche. They can't do it without you. They need us to help create the political space for them to lead. Leadership is a two-way street. It's not somebody going out in front and getting their head cut off. It's about a movement. You are at the vanguard of a movement. You can do it. Other states have done it. Democratic states like Maine, Republican states like Arizona. They've done it. You can do it. You have to do it. Thank you.